Hi, Meteorologist John Dawson. This is the Fox 26 Tropical Forecast. An update here for you on YouTube to make sure that you're kind of just keeping up with what's happening out there, because things continue to remain active even after Nicholas has pretty much come and gone. It is quiet for us here in southeast Texas, but the Atlantic Basin, the Hurricane Center, is having a lot to keep up with at this point. We even have a new tropical storm to talk about. But here at the end of the week, I always like to take a moment and kind of reflect back on what's been happening a little bit in the past week. And yes, it's been very active and a big week for us here, tropically speaking, in southeast Texas. So let's review Nicholas, which, if you'll remember correctly, we were watching for a long time, even when it was over here in the Caribbean, and then it moved across the Yucatan Peninsula, and that's when we knew things were going to get a bit more interesting once it got out over the open waters, and then as it began to develop and get a little bit more organized. And eventually it was Sunday morning when the Hurricane Center officially identified it as a tropical system, Tropical Storm Nicholas. And what I want you to watch as we go through the life of Nicholas, first you're going to definitely notice that there's some jumping around a little bit and backing up even, it looks like. And the storm itself didn't actually really back up, but it kind of kept sort of regenerating itself and finding its low pressure, its most centered point. And so that's why the track kind of jumps around a little bit. And what you'll also notice is throughout its life, especially once it gets a little bit closer to the Texas coast, all of the threats that Nicholas would bring are all on the east and the northeast side. This was a system that was not balanced really ever in its entire life. Always the west and the northwest side was quiet. There was just really nothing happening over on the west side. And so that's one of the reasons why when it did make landfall, the impacts were pretty, sort of isolated on where it happened. And it wasn't nearly as widespread as you would sometimes see, even though the winds are always strongest on the east. A lot of times you'll get a lot of rainfall over on the west side, or even those winds coming around from the backside would create some damage. And we just didn't see that with Nicholas as it moved through its really entire life. So upper level winds were continuing to fight Nicholas as it moved up the Texas coast. And that is really the only thing that kept it from just blossoming into a powerful hurricane. The temperatures, the sea surface temperatures were very warm. That helped to kind of fuel it. But again, some upper level winds coming across it kept it from getting much stronger until right before its landfall. If you'll remember, this is Monday evening around 10 o'clock. It was upgraded to a hurricane, and then eventually north of Matagorda Bay near Sargent is where that official landfall took place. Then it sort of creeped across the Houston area, mostly as a tropical storm. And then once we got into Tuesday evening, right to the east of Houston, that center point again became a tropical depression. And watch how things slow down here quite a bit as it moves across into Louisiana. Still having a lot of rain over here on the east side, but still nothing happening on the west side. And then at 10 a.m. on Friday is when the Hurricane Center officially said we're done with Nicholas, and they turned things over to the Weather Prediction Center, who continues to monitor the rain that's happening and associated with that. So quiet in the Gulf right now. Again, you could kind of see this is some moisture that's really not directly related to Nicholas, but it's kind of getting pulled up a little bit. There's still a bit of that rotation that's there. And if you'll remember with Ida and its remnants and how much rain that it dropped up into New York City. So we're still looking at this potentially being a rainmaker, but notice how the rain is sort of helping to get pulled in further away from the center of what's left of that. And so again, the more or less center is sort of over Louisiana at the moment, but this is all sort of tied together, helping to bring some rain for that portions of the country. I told you there was a new tropical storm to talk about, and here it is, Odette. This was one of those areas that was being watched quite carefully. I think the last update from the Hurricane Center had an 80% chance that it would develop. Well, at 4 p.m. On Friday, went ahead and officially made that a tropical storm, maximum sustained winds at around 40 miles an hour. Odette should stay a tropical storm and should not impact a lot of folks. As it moves on through, we're going to get into the weekend, and we'll begin to see the cooler waters begin to make that fall apart a little bit. So Odette will be one that stays out. over the Atlantic, not impacting a lot of land. That's always good to see, but this will give us one more named system for this year. Sort of looking at those other areas of interest as we've talked about, quiet here in the Gulf of Mexico. Odette will continue to be monitored, not going to worry about it. But the next two areas, first of all, way out in the Atlantic off of the coast, 20 to 30% chance that that would develop over the next 2 to 5 days. And this is the area that we're probably going to need to watch a little bit closer. I'm pretty confident, very confident at least, that this is not going to be a problem for Houston and Texas and probably not even in the Gulf of Mexico. But this is sort of in that area that overall we'll just sort of want to keep an eye on it a little bit. The potential that it would kind of wait and develop later on would actually favor it a little bit more. Hurricane Center right now giving it a 70% chance over 2 days, 80% chance over 5 days. So very likely that this would become a named system. But at this point in time, once it gets closer to the U.S., it has some other things that would be fighting against it, mainly in the form of cold fronts. And that's one thing that if you're here locally, we're definitely talking about a potential cold front, a stronger September front that would arrive midweek for our forecast. And that, again, that impacts tropical systems all across the board and would help prevent something coming a little bit closer. We're continuing to check names off the list. As I mentioned, Nicholas and Odette are done. Peter will be the next system, that name that we will use. So if that develops into something, we would be looking at naming that Peter. Great that you could join us here on YouTube and get an update here on the tropics. I will continue to be here throughout the weekend updating you on YouTube, but of course you can also find me on social media at John Dawson Fox 26. If you search Meteorologist John Dawson on YouTube, you will be able to find all of my hurricane gear test segments, which is really what we always want to be doing, thinking really year-round, is continually preparing for hurricane season. And please don't forget the Fox 26 weather app. That's been a very valuable tool, whether we're in a tropical system near Houston or whether we're not. It keeps you updated on our rain chances. And yes, there are some rain chances to talk about locally here in Houston as we move through the weekend.